Welcome to Elevating La Cultura podcast, a space where I talk with Latinas who are passionate about what they do and are willing to share that passion with others to change the narrative, especially for the next generation. Each season is centered around different topics, but all with a Latina perspective. Welcome to Season 7. I'm so excited to share these stories and hope they will offer encouragement, wisdom, and be something that you can relate to. So vámonos, and let's get into it. Hola! Today I'm talking with Adriana Galvan. We met last year through our monthly networking events, and I'm so happy we did because she is just such an inspiration. Adriana is a Latina business owner with her own financial literacy education and money coaching business. She is the owner and founder of Adriana Talks Dinero, LLC. She wants to inspire and empower the minority and disadvantaged with the skills and the knowledge to gain a conscious path to financial freedom with her small business. So let's get into our conversation. Hey, I am so excited to be starting a new season and being able to chat with some more amazing Latinas. And we're starting out the season with Adriana. I've known her for maybe like almost 6+ months. We met last year, and I'm so excited that I get to have her share her story. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So thank you, Karina, for having me on. I'm so excited to be here. So, like you said, I am Adriana Galvan. I am the owner and founder of Adriana Talks Dinero, which is a financial literacy education and money coaching small business. So I'm out of Elgin, Illinois, but since I do a lot of my money coaching virtually, I actually have clients all throughout the state of Illinois. So yeah, super excited to be here.
That's amazing. I'm really excited to dive a little deeper on like the money talk. I don't think I've had any guest on here where we've talked about finances. So I'm so excited to get a little deeper into that. But before we do that, why don't you tell us like what got you to this place?
So it's been quite a journey to get to this place, actually. So I guess the first part was really the way that I grew up. So I'm the oldest of two. Both my parents are immigrants from Mexico. And my father was a mechanic when I was growing up, and my mom was really a stay-at-home mom. And then once we were into elementary and high school and whatnot, she really worked around our hours to make sure she was home during the times that we were home. So with that, raising two kids and in the suburbs of Chicago, it's not cheap. So mom was always really frugal. I guess you can kind of say she shopped at Aldi before it was cool. So I have pretty fond memories of my childhood. Like in the summer, the cousins will come over. Dad had a pickup truck. And for anyone that lives in the Chicago area, grew up in the 90s, we used to have like a nickel and dime sale at Jewel's. So you'd get like oranges or like chips and things like that for like a nickel and a dime. So mom would always give each cousin a cart, and you would purchase at the limit because each of us were technically a customer. And we would do this like at midnight and load up dad's truck and just unpack everything at home. And we would just have like fresh squeezed orange juice in the morning and things like that. So, that frugality really came from that, and going to like estate sales and things like that. And even as we got into an older age where we started understanding what money really was, we had a envelope system at home. So mom had a desk that my grandfather purchased for her when she was going to school, and she's literally drug that desk from house to house as we've moved around. And on the top right hand drawer, I still remember we each had like just a regular envelope like you would send mail in. And for me and my brother, it would say our names on it for allowance money. We had pets growing up, so even the pets had an envelope, and it would say, we had a dog named Licorice, so it said like Licorice's allowance, and we would use that for his food and things like that, and groceries and gas. So we really learned this whole idea of not having instant gratification, that we had to save for things, and if we wanted something, we had to either pay for it or save for it. And that kind of followed me all all through my years of, teenage to adulthood. But really, the business really started, I want to say, um, in two instances. So one time, for a 9 to 5, I work in human resources. That's what I went to school for. And I ended up at a job um, after I finished my master's program. And I took it because it was, good money. And I'm like, I'm ready to leave this other job. Like, it was just going downhill at the other job. So I took it with, being young and you really not understanding like what you should look for in a job. I took it, and at first I'm like, okay, cool, I can do this. And then I started seeing how the company was, and I I wasn't happy. It was the middle of the pandemic. Unfortunately, my mom had ovarian cancer around that same time that the pandemic happened too. So I'm like, you know what? I can't just like up and leave. If mom needs me, I gotta take FMLA. I just bought a house probably like a few months beforehand, like less than a year beforehand. Like, I have a mortgage to pay, I have bills and things like that. So I'm like, I have to make a plan. So what I ended up doing once the pandemic happened, which I guess was a little bit of a blessing in disguise in that aspect of it, instead of me going out and, things like that, I like hoarded as much money as possible. So from the time of January to November, I hoarded enough money to have 9 months worth of living expenses. Now, when I say living expenses, it's kind of like bare bones. And thankfully at that time too, I was still driving my car from high school. So in our family, we get the choice of either a new car for your 16th birthday or a quinceañera. So I'm like, I'm doing the car. So I still had the car. It's actually sitting in my dad's garage right now, trying to fix it and see if we can get it up to speed again, all these years later. But I didn't have a car payment. And because it was an older car, the insurance wasn't that high. I live in a small 2-bedroom house. So my expenses aren't that high. I cook at home, and I love to travel, but during the pandemic, of course, we couldn't go anywhere. So that really cut my going out expenses by a lot. So come November, like before Thanksgiving, I had a conversation with someone who I entrusted in the company, and I still talk to her to this day. I kind of call her like my little guardian angel in a way. She really helped me throughout that whole process. And I said, I'm just ready to go. And I told her what I was doing. And she's like, well, what are you doing here? Like, leave. She's like, this isn't serving you. You deserve so much better. Like, just go. You'll find something. So, I went ahead and I took it upon myself. I'm like, all right, I'm going to go. I'm going to go ahead and put in my 3-week notice. We're in the middle of an audit. And I said to myself, I never want to do upon someone what I don't want done upon me. So I said, I'm not going to leave my team, what was left of it, because a lot of the girls were leaving. What was left of the team, I didn't want to leave them high and dry during this huge audit that was going on. And I told my boss, I said, you know what? I can't do this anymore. I'm not happy. Like, my health is going down the drain. I was like literally like in a depression. And it wasn't a good situation. It was just one of those toxic work places. So I told him, I'm giving you a 3 weeks notice. That way you have enough time to find someone to help me, but so I don't leave you high and dry during the audit. So he just kind of looked at me. He's like, well, where are you going? And I said, I'm not going anywhere. And I told him exactly what I said, that I have 9 months worth of living expenses, and I'm just gonna, hey, go for it and, see what job I can find, but I'm gonna relax for the holidays. So he was really surprised, and he even told me, he's like, that's really aspiring to do. He's like, because I could never do it. Come to find out, he wasn't happy at the job either. And as I started telling more people, and they're like, where are you going? And I'm like, nowhere. I don't have a job lined up, but I'm okay financial wise. And I told them what I did. And a lot of them were telling me very much the same thing. Like, I wish I could do that, or I could never do that, or, I didn't know that was a possible thing. And that's kind of when like the seed was planted in a way. And I ended up leaving that job. Actually, that same week that I was leaving, I got a job offer for another job. So thankfully, the stars aligned and I ended up being okay. Fast forward with that job, I was super happy. It was like 10 minutes away from the house. Pay was still pretty good. 9 months into that job, unfortunately, because the pandemic was really unkind to the auto industry, they were closing down the entire location. So not only was I going to get laid off, but I had to lay off as the sole HR person 140 people. Now, well, I knew that was not my choice. That wasn't any sort of blame on me. Um, just seeing that entire process was so heartbreaking. I remember being Mexican American, I'm bilingual, and I've worked in both of those were in manufacturing. So I had to make the announcement with the president of the division. So he would say it in English and I would say it in Spanish. I kid you not, towards the end, I just started crying. And my poor employees were just like crying along with me because they're like, well, this girl like never cries. Like she's, pretty tough. And just seeing all of that kind of go on, like the psychological part of it, like the worry that they have to go through. And I really try to support them the best that I can in helping them find other jobs by doing on-site job fairs, by trying to give out recommendation letters to those who were my really good employees that was personal from me, not so much from like the company. Or even trying to find them some sort of help if they didn't land a job right away on, where can you go find some sort of employment outreach, or, walking them through unemployment, because the majority of us have never been on unemployment before. So, reaching out to the state to see if there's classes and what's out there for everyone. And there was really this sort of conversation as well around that. It came a realization to me because about 75% of my population was Hispanic or Latine, and they were not ready for this sort of like earth shaking sort of thing that was going on. They didn't have any sort of retirement funds or anything like that. And I said, Adriana, something has to change. And I didn't look for a job right away. I had all these people coming to me and they're like, you're an amazing person. Like, I want to go ahead and give you this job. I said, you know what? Like, this is like a traumatic thing. And I need to take time off and, kind of take a deep dive for me. So I said to myself, and I'm like, let's go ahead and start this business. There's such a need. There was a need then when I left my first toxic job. And there's such a need now as I'm getting laid off and I'm living through all of this. And I'm kind of living side to side with 140 other people on this. I don't have a family. I'm not I guess I'm the sole breadwinner, being the only person, right? I live with my boyfriend, but I'm dependent on myself. But here are these families who have, 3 kids that are like in elementary school, or they take care of their parents, or, they send money to their home countries. And it's like, something's got to give at this point. And that's really where the seed was starting to grow. Like the seed was sowed before, and now this is kind of like the roots were starting to like come in, and like the flower was about to bloom. So I remember telling my boss, because she's like, I can go ahead and give you recommendation letters and whatnot. And I was offered a job at another division within the company, but I declined it. I said, no, it's quite traumatic to be in this. And unfortunately, my trust isn't there anymore. So it's just better for me to go and just start anew, whatever that may be. So I remember telling my boss about like a month before we were all getting laid off. And I said, just so you know, I'm not going back into HR right away. It's going to kind of be on the side if I need it, but I'm going to go ahead and move forward with this small business. And I told her what it was. And she's just like, well, that's astonishing because, with how much you've helped your employee population from even the start, and then seeing the strength and the perseverance that you have during this traumatic time. She's like, I can't see a better way for you to use your resources. So I got laid off April 19th of 2022. I said, let me go ahead and run away to Mexico for a little bit to go ahead and just kind of put the pieces together. So I went to Isa Oldbach, and I was there by myself for about 5 days, just trying to like put the pieces together and things like that. And, you know, during this time, I will say it was a huge like mental drain and a psychological drain. And for anyone who's going through something like this, I kid you not, go out and reach out to someone for therapy. The minute that I found out that we were getting laid off, I called a therapist. I found myself a Latina therapist nearby, and I said, "This is what's going on. I don't need anxiety. I don't need all this additional stress. And I need to learn how to disconnect my self worth to a job, because that's what I saw in myself and to a lot of my employees. They're really connecting that self worth of who they are and what they are to this title or to the amount of money that they have. And she thankfully helped me through it and really helped me through kind of that imposter syndrome and, you know, having that confidence to start a small business, because that is scary within itself. Like, here I am leaving one situation, which is a little traumatic, and going into a scary situation of vouching for yourself, and starting a business. You know, just well as I do, Karina, it's not easy. It's a struggle within itself, but it does have its good times and its bad times as well. Um, and that's kind of where Adriana Talks Dinero really started. It's really to lift up the community and to talk about money. And then if you get laid off, how do you get into this other job and get paid appropriately? You know, how do you manage your money and how do you prepare yourself financially in the case that, you know, you get laid off from work? You turn on the news, it's all these tech companies right now that are laying off thousands and thousands of people, which breaks my heart because I literally lived through that not even a year ago. You know, if you have an abusive spouse and you're like, you know, this is it, but you know, I can't leave because of the kids and this and that, you know, to find some way out of that. Or if, you know, if you don't have kids, you're just in a really toxic marriage or relationship, how you can find that way out. um or even if for an individual who may be coming out and they're like, my God, my family's going to disown me because they don't agree with, you know, my way of thought or the way I'm going to live. If you're financially stable, yes, it's going to hurt, but I feel you look at statistics and it's the biggest stressor, not only here in the United States, but around the world, is money. Like, how am I going to make it? So if you're prepared for those worst of the worst situations, then that just kind of alleviates it, and it can take this whole ton of bricks off of your shoulders, which is really what Adriana Talks Dinero is all about, to encourage people to ask for their wage, for their worth and wages. It's for you to understand what sort of bank accounts work for you, to understand that investing is not scary and you can invest, understanding what a 401k is, what a 403b is, understanding what other sorts of benefits that one gets from a job can help you out in the long run, or what you can do as a business owner. So yeah, it's been quite the lifelong journey where it's all kind of connected the dots to here. It's been a very windy road. But like I said, I did go back into HR. I did not leave my business. It's just with businesses, of course, we know it takes quite a while to, you know, get to that point. And Adriana Talks Dinero really started in April of 2022. And I look at my baby now and I'm like, my goodness, we've come pretty far, you know, within those few months. So I'm excited to see what's going to happen in the future.
That was quite a story. And I thank you so much for sharing transparently, like the shifts and the pivots that you had to go through. Because you are right. Like, having a business is not easy, but I think a lot of that comes from not being financially prepared to leave a job. And I think it goes like, I love the fact that you were prepared to do a pivot. Like, as soon as you knew that you were like thinking about something else, that you were like slightly like not happy with where you were, you're like, let me start saving, let me start preparing for something that could potentially come next, so that way when I get there, I'm not like completely like starting from ground zero, and completely like you said, the financial piece of living in the US is the stress can be so high. And so I think it's like when you take that kind of like pressure off, it gives you that much more mental capacity to welcome in a pivot or welcome in a shift, welcome in a layoff, um, because you don't have to like think about your bank account being at zero. I think that's something that we're not taught in school, is to have that cushion. A lot of times we're so proud to get a job, and then we're like, okay, well, this is what I can do with this money, and I can like pay for this and I can help my family, but you're not actually setting a foundation of security. So I think your story is like, it sets you up so perfectly, because even just like when you were a kid, you knew where like the dollars were coming from. Like your family was so intentional about budgeting and saying like, okay, well, this is how much money you have. Like I remember the envelopes when I was like, I had my allowance and I would put them in the envelopes, and one was for savings and one was
Yes.
for spending, one was for like giving. And yeah, it's real. I don't know if any of the listeners can relate to that, but in the 90s, like that was a big thing, especially like if you had Latina parents
Yeah.
who were like needed to know where each dollar was coming from and where it was
Mm-hmm.
going. Um,
Absolutely.
and so I think you so beautifully took the foundation that you had from such a young age, implemented it, and are now able to help others who did not have that foundation or like weren't taught that foundation, which is amazing. I want to go back and like touch on the fact that you, when you needed to take some time off and really regroup, I can definitely resonate with that, because when I was in this like crisis, midlife crisis shift, not midlife, more like quarter life crisis, where I'm just like, I don't know if I want to continue doing the work that I'm doing, but I don't know what's next. I also went back to Mexico and took some time to just regroup. And I think that's so powerful, because as Mexican Americans, like we find such comfort in our roots. And I know that being able to do that is such a privilege, and being able to travel and see our family is such a privilege. I want to ask, like, are for people who don't have the funds to do that but kind of need that space to regroup, how can they either like start saving up or like find other ways to kind of have that space to then like refocus their lives?
So the best way for savings is really, so it's really looking at your budget, right? It's like the way that I always tell people when they start coaching with me, um, and we end up going down like that budget route, take a highlighter, take 3 different colors, and start going through, either if you use a debit card or a credit card, start going through and put on there in one color what your necessities are, right? Like things that you need to live, you need to pay for in order to live. So it's that the gas money for the car to get to work, it's the mortgage or the rent, it's the food. And I'm not talking that all of your, DoorDash and McDonald's trips. I'm talking about like food that you have to survive off of. If you have pets, it's like the dog food and the cat food. And then, so that's all your necessities. Next, it's like kind of like you're in the next color, you're going to do your like your savings or your debt kind of payments that you have to do. So those of us who have student loans, or if you're paying a car note, or you're paying back debt from a personal loan or medical bills or whatever, that's the next color. That last color, this one's going to be the tough one. That's all of the expenses that you don't need necessarily to live day by day. When I'm talking need to live, it's bare necessities. I'm all for people budgeting and for spending money on self-care, what makes you happy and things like that. I'm not one of those types of money coaches that say, no, you have to eat like beans and rice. No, that's not me. I know that's not feasible. So it's like, maybe that Hulu account you're not watching, or maybe it's that trip to Ulta or Sephora that you really didn't need to go to, or it's you going to Target and you only needed a gallon of milk and now you walked out with, a whole new outfit from because they have really cute spring stuff. Um, and that's when you start really seeing where your spending habits are. And that last color that you highlighted for all those extra things like the DoorDash and the makeup and everything else, the eating out or the alcohol, and whatever other sort of frivolous things that you spend on, that's where you start cutting down. And you'll go ahead and start moving that money into a savings account, which I always recommend a high yield savings account. For those people who don't know what a high yield savings account is, to put it pretty simple, it's like a regular bank. And they usually they have some checking, but they have savings. And it is an online platform. So it's an online banking service. And these banks usually give you 25 times more interest on the money you have in there than you would at a traditional brick and mortar bank. A lot of people are like, well, Adriana, how in the world can they give me like 4% in my savings here where Chase is paying me like 0.01%? I don't even get a penny every quarter. And the reason why is because Chase is paying all this money for the brick and mortar. So if you think of a Chase bank, at the corner of your neighborhood, they have to pay for landscaping, they have to pay for snow plowing, they got to pay the employees, they got to pay the electricity, the gas, the heating, the maintenance of the building, the window washers, all of that stuff. And even like the physical, tangible things like toilet paper and pens and all of that. Instead of a high yield savings account bank or online platform bank paying all that money in order to manage a bank, and someone like Chase or BMO Harris or Bank of America have tons of branches, they give all that money to you, the customer or the consumer. So if you don't have one, that's one of the best ways. And then two, that money is accessible to you, but guess what? It takes about 2 to 3 days in order to get that money. So it's not an easy transfer. So it really is kind of one of those things like out of sight, out of mind. Now, if you're really struggling, what I would say, where I kind of go, where I need some sort of grounding or I need to be like con mi gente, I'll go here in Elgin. I live right next to East Dundee, so we have like a tianguis here in Elgin. It's the Latine population has really grown, so I can go. I actually just got carnitas for breakfast, so I went to the little shop at the downtown Elgin to go get some carnitas y una ensalada de nopales because I was really craving it this morning. So going to those places where you kind of are with your people. If you're in the Chicago area, head out to Pilsen, go out to La Villita, go to these places. If there's a festival going on where it's free entry or on donations, go. Because sometimes it is just kind of that little humbleness or, that grounding where we need to go to like a really good taco shop, or we need to go have like some good agua frescas, or you just want to go to El Tianguis, or, whatever it is, that could be some grounding that you may need. That's temporarily there until you can book that ticket to go to your homeland or go see abuelitas and abuelitos and all your tios and tias.
Yeah, I love that. I always think people may put off doing a budget because it can be overwhelming to see all of your expenses, especially like those expenses that like, oh, I don't need to get Grubhub, or like all of the little things that add up. It took me a while to like go through and actually do a budget, but it can be so empowering as well, like to know like, okay, I'm over budget. I have a goal to either pay off this debt or to save for this. And I'm choosing, like, for the month to not spend anything extra on Target or not do XYZ. And I think, and maybe you can talk a little bit more about this, it can seem daunting because sometimes we think that we have to cut it out of our lives forever. Um, so I don't know if you can talk a little bit about how it's just a means to an end. Like it's not necessarily like for I'm never gonna go to Ulta to get makeup ever again.
Absolutely. So I love that aspect of it, right? And really the way that like I coach and I educate people is I don't expect you to cut everything out. I'll give you, an example on one of my clients. She likes to spend her money on a recreational thing. And I'm like, I'm not telling you to cut that out. It's legal here in the state. I'm not going to tell you to cut that out. Just budget for it. Like, do not spend a whole bunch of money on it, but just extend it out a little bit or budget yourself where you're not buying so much of it. So, it's not even just a means of just like cutting it out completely. You can bring it back later on once you've taken care of the other responsibilities, such as debt, or let's say that you have a goal to buy a house and you're saving up for that down payment. And then once you bought your house, then you can start creeping into it a little bit. But keep in mind now it's a new responsibility, which has its own expenses. But or let's say that you end up figuring out I have a negotiation class on how to know what your salary should be and how to negotiate for it. Let's say right now you're not getting paid effectively, so you are kind of living, very much on bare bones, but you're like, you know what? Because I took this workshop with Adriana, I know that I should be making $15,000 more. Let me negotiate at work. If they're not going to do it, let me go find a new job that they're going to pay me that much more, and then you can start putting those things in. So a lot of time with budgeting, like you said, it's daunting to look at all of that, and it's scary. It's the scariest part of all of my clients like journey is taking out that highlighter, those three colors, and really breaking it down and putting it into a worksheet that I send to all of them and really seeing the numbers. And I tell them all, I'm like, some of you may get sick, like physically sick. You want to throw up because of how much money you're spending on X amount of things. Some of you are going to cry because you're like, well, here I am, like working so hard for my money, and I literally let it, go out the window. Some of you are going to have all of these different sorts of emotions. And I feel like, especially with us being like first generation, there's these money traumas that we have to get over. And a lot of us, we saw our parents just trying to survive. So as we're getting these better paying jobs, as we're okay and we have these blessings that our parents didn't have, it's really hard to say, okay, like I can go ahead and buy this, or I can go ahead and, like, for me it was like a huge thing, like buying my own house and moving out by myself. Granted, I have very feminist parents and they supported me in that, and it was something that was drilled in my head from my dad, like, you buy your own house before you get married, because if he does you wrong, échalo al calle, like we're not doing this in this family. But I know that a lot of us don't have that, and I'm fully aware of that. But if you're an individual who's like, you know what, like this is not serving me anymore where I'm at home and I need to go out and thrive, or I need to go move to another state for a better job or a better opportunity, and you get guilted into it, it's really understanding that, sometimes we have to do those things. Sometimes we have to go against what the culture tells us. Um, Especially with money. I don't know if you experience this, but a lot of my clients have, where it was always like, pues no hablas del dinero. Like you don't ask any questions about it. You should be humble about it. You shouldn't want to be rich. You shouldn't want to have money, things like that. And it's like, well, no, like I'm not saying like I want to be like, filthy rich and be like a horrible person, but the culture seems to always bring up that, you know, rich people are like evil people, and that's not always the case. Yes, there's some cases of that, but that's not always the case. There's some people who are like silent millionaires and they're driving their 99 Toyota Corolla, and they're just wearing like Levi jeans and like a t-shirt that they got at a garage sale, but you have no idea that they have, a few houses that they're renting out, or they have a nice, little nest going on with investments because they're not here to like show it off or anything. So it's really, I feel it's just, we have a lot of money traumas to get over as a community. And it's just, it's not spoken about. And, this is why one of my big success within Adriana Talks Dinero has been that negotiation class. It, a lot of, a lot of my clients are women. Yeah, they are Hispanic or Latino women. And like the light bulb goes off when I'm like, you deserve to be paid this much. And I feel so many times as women of color, we think that because we got a job, we're lucky to be there, when that's not the case. Like, you deserve to be there. You should be there. Like, we need more people in those sorts of positions or in those sorts of fields and things like that. You go off and you ask your worth. You ask for what you're worth, because just as well as I do, there's a huge pay gap between a, a cis white man and then, a Latina. Like, we're like the lowest paid people here. The lowest paid people. And it's really empowering the Latinas to be like, hey, like, this is what you should be getting paid. And I literally go through the entire thing. I show you how to get to market value. I give you the scripts. I tell you what you can negotiate, because it's not always about money. Someone like me, I like to travel. So I ask for more vacation time than what the policy says. Guess what? Yeah, that's what the policy says. Here's an HR person telling you, you can negotiate more vacation time. You can negotiate things against the policy. And let me tell you, if you're already in that stage where they give you the offer letter, they want you. Whatever you're asking for is not too much. Whatever you're asking for is not going to be like, oh, we're pulling this offer letter away. And if they are, good riddance. Go find someone that does respect you and does know your worth and honors you, because we should be paid appropriately.
I think it's so important for the work that you do specifically, because it is a lot of mindset shifts that we have to go through in regards to money, a lot of money traumas that we have gone through. And it is so much more impactful and powerful to be working with someone and talking with someone who gets it. I think that that is one of the questions that I was going to touch on. Like, how does your Latinidad inspire your work? And I think you said it beautifully already, that as first gen Mexican Americans or first gen immigrants, like, we are literally the bridge between like two completely different mindsets when it comes to pretty much everything, but
Yeah,
specifically money. Um,
absolutely.
and I think I remember growing up and we didn't talk about money. Like, we didn't, like, sometimes I knew that we had extra money to be spending on like Lunchables, and sometimes we didn't, but I didn't actually know how everything worked and why it was okay to have like piano lessons, and then a few months later we couldn't have, or I didn't have piano lessons. And so I think it's a lot of us millennials and like our generation saying like, why don't we talk about this, because this is important. And I see that there is like my peers that are going to school and they're white, and so they have a different money mindset. Why can't I like understand money the way they do? And so we're doing the hard work of doing the mindset shifts. And so when we're doing the mindset shifts, it's so important to talk to someone else who understands and can walk alongside us to with grace and empathy and kindness, because I have worked with like a financial planner, financial advisors that don't understand my lived experiences, and I can't connect with them, and then I don't continue working with them because they don't understand the mental things that I have to work through in order to get to the place that they're telling me I should already be at.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think it is really important that you are doing the work that you're doing for our community?
Yeah, and it's really, at the end of the day, I just want everyone to win, whatever that may mean to you. I don't expect everyone to open up a business. I don't expect everyone to go to school. I just expect everyone to win, whatever that means to you at the end of the day. Um, and it's really empowering the next generation and, like you said, healing those money traumas. And it's really getting us prepared for whatever may come. Um, and that's another part that I do go over in one of my courses too, just kind of preparation for the worst of the worst. For me, I can go ahead and talk about me, for example. The minute that I bought my house, I went to go to a lawyer, and I'm not married. I just have a cat and a dog. Those are my kids. And I have a living will. I have, a living trust. I have a will set up. I have power of attorneys. I have beneficiaries. So if something were to happen to me, and I think that's kind of what HR really shows you in the world, that life is really full of up and downs. The amount of stories that I have from employees is unbelievable. But I know that if something were to happen to me tomorrow, my family's okay. I don't have to worry about my parents fighting for my house with probate. And let me tell you, I've been with my boyfriend for quite a while. The day that we do get engaged, I'm going to that same lawyer. I'm like, it's time for a prenup, because I feel like we as first generation Latinas, we don't talk about the worst of the worst. We don't talk about, divorces. We don't talk about what if someone passes away. And I attribute that a lot to my parents. And I've had this conversation with them actually about 2 weeks ago, just kind of telling them, thank you for having that conversation with us about death. And, telling us from a very young age, like, here, like dad would be like, here's the will, if just in case mom and dad, if something ever happens to us, and your uncle is responsible for the money, and so and so is going to care for you, like, you guys are going to be okay. And if you ever need to grab it for whatever reason, it's here in this drawer. So there was always that sort of transparency, and I feel that especially in our generation, and not some and yeah, in our generation, but like in our culture, we don't think about that. We don't think about like the life insurance policies. We don't think about those emergency funds. We don't think about prenups. There's a thing called postnups. So if you're married already and you're like, yeah, it's time to go ahead and um, to prepare ourselves, or what if this marriage goes wrong, because I've seen everyone else's marriage go the other way, you can go ahead and do postnup and whatnot. So that preparation part of it, or thinking years and years ahead, or like the worst of the worst, is just something that we don't talk about or isn't conversed about in our culture at all.
Yeah. So I am so glad again that you are being transparent and bringing this to light, and then also trying to bring the education to our communities. Um, I think it's I think it's time that, or at least I'm seeing the shift in conversation of our generation, and saying, like, all of these topics were taboo. We didn't talk about them, but why not? Like, let's talk about it. Let's bring it up, and let's find good solutions to heal and better ourselves for the next generation. Which brings me to ask, what are your big goals for the year?
Yeah, so some goals I'm working on right now is actually, so right now I do one-on-one money coaching, either in person or virtually. Like I said, I have people from all over the state. Um, I also have workshops that I do virtually. I tried in person over the summer and it just didn't work out too well, which I can understand, because it's a daunting topic to talk about finances, and you don't know if you know someone else that's going to be at the workshop. So I do it virtual. No one knows who's in on the room, pretty much, like through Zoom. Um, but what I'm really looking into is doing coursework, like doing it all recorded and having it be on a platform where I'll go ahead and put the recording. I'll put all the worksheets, if whatever other tools you need. And it will be basically on a platform. You'll pay a fee for this certain course and you can go ahead and take it on your own time, because I remember back to like my college years, I worked 2 jobs and I went to school full time. And I know that there's so many other people out there that do something very similar, or that they work really odd hours if they're in like the service industry or in the restaurant industry. Um, and I just want this information to be accessible to everybody, because it shouldn't be gate kept. It should be shared with everyone. So I'm hoping to have that launched in the spring and have that up and going, and really start picking what the popular courses are going to be to put on there. Um, and also this spring, so actually this week we had the virtual book launch for a book that I'm a part of. So I'm a contributing author for Latinas in Finances. It's 18 Latinas in the finance space who have come together, and we've really shared our stories and how we've gotten to this point. There's quite a bit more information in there than what I gave here on the podcast today. I don't have the book in my hands yet. I have not read everyone else's stories, but I know that they're super inspiring because they're great women. So if anyone is interested in a copy, definitely head over to my website on adrianatalksdinero.com. That would be the best place to go ahead and purchase that.
Yes, I think everyone should be keeping up with what you've got going on this year. It's going to be amazing. Can you share on social media like where people can find you? Because I know you share so much information. I love the reels that you do and the posts that you do. It's just like bite-sized pieces of information that are so like applicable to anyone's life.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on TikTok. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook. I do also have an account with Twitter and with LinkedIn. I'm not as active on those two. It's more of the TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook that I'm more active on. But pretty much what you were saying, I actually started this year. I made a goal for myself. I'm like, I want to give more free content because there's no gatekeeping here at Adriana Talks Dinero. So it's little bits and pieces of financial tips or education, or some sort of educational thing around personal finance that I do every Friday, and I call it Finance Fridays. So you'll see my reel pop up every single Friday where I kind of choose a topic. If it's something around investing, if it's something around home buying, if it's something around medical expenses. It's going to be an array of different topics, and it's really just, like you said, bite-sized pieces to empower our community and to really educate everyone to make better financial choices in 2023.
Yes, I love it. I look forward to the Finance Fridays every week. They're so good. So good.
Thank you.
And then I like to end each episode with the same question, and that is, what encouragement or advice do you have for the next generation? I know that you shared so much wisdom and so much advice, but I like to have something that people can really take away and think about like throughout the day after they listen to the episode, and like start applying, or like actually like thinking in their heads, like how am I going to make this personal in my life? How am I going to take this advice and make it personal so that I can shift and make generational changes for the next generation?
So I would say, and I've been working on this quite a bit from like my mid-20s to now, I'm 32 right now, to live your most authentic life. I feel like that would just kind of, me living within my most authentic life has kind of spread into so many different areas of my life, because there's so many bits and pieces of us that makes a complete person, right? There's so many bits and pieces that makes a complete Karina. There's so many bits and pieces that makes a complete Adriana. And when you are your authentic self, you end up finding beautiful people. You end up finding beautiful community. I'll give you a good example. Like I'm an adventurer. I love traveling. I'm a bookworm. I enjoy going to the local gym here. I do yoga. I go do weightlifting. With the small business part of me, I have the community that you and Veronica have placed for us. And when you show up authentically for yourself, like it just speaks volumes. So don't put in your mind to like, oh, reading a book is nerdy or whatever. Guess what? I'm part of a book club that's all Latinas. We all love reading. We all get together and ahí estamos chillando and everything because we have a really good book that makes us cry because it pulls at our heartstrings. There's a community for you. You want to go try yoga? The yoga place I go to here in Elgin, Latina owned too. If you want to go ahead and start your own business, hey, you have myself, you have Karina, and then you have an extension of us in a community. If you love traveling, there's a whole bunch of traveling groups for Latinas who are willing to go do those scary things too. I think it's just really showing up authentically, and that's what I really try to do in my business. And don't be scared what the society is going to say, what the world's going to say about you. I remember my mom always told me, damned if you do, damned if you don't. People are going to talk if you do what you want to do and what if you don't want to do at the end of the day. So just do what makes you happy. And, I really do try to live life that way. Like, do what makes you happy and live within your authentic self and do what makes you happy. Because as I've gone on, with my life, and I have, people who are much older than me in my lives as acquaintances or friends or family members and whatnot. And the thing that breaks my heart the most is when I meet someone who is starting to come close to retirement years and they're like, I don't know what makes me happy. I don't know what I want out of life. Or what in the world did I just do with like the 55 years of my life? And I think that's just something that all of us really have to do moving forward, is to be authentic, because we're going to thank ourselves so many more years down the road.
I love that. That is the mic drop, if there wasn't ever a mic drop. Well, in this podcast, there's no mic in the podcast, but yes, 100%. Thank you so much for sharing that. Man, this whole episode was amazing. And I know that we could talk for another hour
Yes.
on all the things that you touched on. But I am just so appreciative of your time and your transparency, and everyone should go follow. I will post links in the show notes, and I am excited for what is to come. And congratulations on the book launch. I know that was huge.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. It's been such a pleasure.
Awesome. Well, we will see each other soon, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
All right. Have a good rest of the day. Bye.
Bye.
Wasn't that such a good conversation? Now you have a resource on helping you start thinking or continue thinking about your finances more wisely. For real, you gotta follow her Finance Friday tips on Instagram. They're so helpful. In other news, I started something new, the Elevating la Cultura Comunidad on Facebook. You can join our private group to continue the conversations we have on the podcast and so much more. I am launching a live 3-day training called Showing Up Latina, Embrace and Revitalize Your Cultural Identity. It's going to be so good. So you can check that out either on the Facebook group or at elevatinglacultura.com/showinguplatina. Okay, amigos, there will be a new episode every Tuesday, so after you listen, feel free to take a screenshot to post on Instagram and tag at Elevating La Cultura or send me a DM. You can also comment on our YouTube video if you're watching online. I always like to hear from people and how they resonate with the stories that I share. So leave a review on Apple Podcasts so we can get more ears listening to these stories and we can continue elevating la cultura. All right. Enjoy the rest of your day, afternoon, evening, whenever you're listening, y nos vemos next week. Bye.